You know, it was a series when one team was ripe for the picking while the other one were going to be a 1 year wonder that was going to bring them all the way to the Stanley Cup final. So, today, ladies and gentlemen, in a change of pace, we're going to be looking at a very interesting series when the Philadelphia Flyers, who made it to the Stanley Cup finals in 1980, and the New York Rangers faced off in probably one of the most interesting quarterfinal series of the 1970s. Now, Philadelphia was hard pressed to get past, of all teams, Vancouver in the first round. He lost the first game at home, barely squeaked by the Canucks 6-4 in game two, but wrapped it up. But the key point of the game, ladies and gentlemen, the series, wasn't the opener. The Flyers won the opening game 3-2 on the backs of youth sensation Robbie Moore, who stopped 22 shots. Now, in that game at the Spectrum, Don Maloney gave the Rangers an early 1-0 lead, with Bob Kelly tying it at 16:52 of the first. Esposito, with his third of the postseason, scored at 9:10 of the second to give the Rangers a 2-1 win. But in the third, Billy Barber at 15:02 and Kenny Linsman early in the extra frame scored. Now, we thought that the Flyers obviously were going to be advancing in the set because the Rangers seemed a little bit too old and a little bit too young. However, on the backs of John Davidson and a mixture again of veterans of youth, this is what happened. They won four straight to win the series 4-1 and advanced all the way to the Stanley Cup final and gave Montreal all they could handle in the first two contests, leading 2-0 in game two after winning game one, but failing the rest of the way. Now, game two at the Spectrum, probably the biggest blowout for the Flyers at home in the playoffs in the decade. Stevie Vickers opened the scoring for the Rangers at 2:21, with Frank Bates scoring at 7:45, and then in what was considered the biggest goal for the Rangers in a decade, Ron Greschner scored on the shorthand, the winner at 18:22. In the second, Maloney, Greschner again on the power play, while Eddie Johnson scored at 10:41, and in the third, Don Murdoch on the power play. The second power play goal for the Rangers, with Mike McEwen getting another one 17-18. Robbie Moore was pulled after giving up 4 goals on 17 shots, and Wayne Stevenson went the rest of the way but only stopped 16 of 19, while John Davidson stopped 32 of 33. Now, in Game 3 at Madison Square Garden, the masker at MSG, the Flyers really didn't show up. They did score first on Mel Bridgman's counter at 1:38, but from then on, it was all Rangers with Don Maloney at 2:15 and 2:41, 2 goals in 26 seconds, followed by Anders Hedberg on a shorthanded counter at 5:39. And in the third, Ron Duguay and Don Murdoch scoring with 12 seconds left, made it a convincing 5-1 win. Now, Davidson stopped 32 of 33, while Wayne Stevenson stopped 20 of 24. Now, game 4, 2 nights later on the 26th, was a total immense blowout. Don Murdoch, having a hot series, had his third of the set at 3:43 of the first, with Eddie Johnson scoring his second at 6:33. Espo scored at 2 minutes in the second period, with Bobby Sheen, who had played the whole year in the minors, scored his first goal of the postseason. Murdoch again scoring on a power play, 6:58 in the third period, with Eddie Johnson scoring his third on the shorthand at 11:39. Anyway, 11-1 outscoring the Flyers. The Flyers were showing no defense. Robbie Moore got to start again in replace of Stevenson, only stopped 24 of 30 shots, while Davidson was 28 and 29. Now, game 5 in the Spectrum was a complete and utter blowout, probably the worst game that the Flyers ever played in the postseason. Ron Greschner with his fourth in the power play at 9:55, with veteran Walt Tkachuk scoring at 13:26. Tkachuk had his second at 2:03, and this later on, Reggie Leach at Steve Vickers made it 4-0 at 4:13. 4:13. 5-0 by Ron Duguay at 8:19. But from then on, the Flyers made a dynamic comeback to make it 5-3. Reggie Leach, his fifth in the postseason at 10:37. Bobby Daly at 12:21 and 15:27. Ben Wilson. But from there, it was all the veterans and the youth. Carol Vadney at 1650, Eddie Johnson at 1724, and Anders Hedberg at 1926 to wrap it up. Now, Ulf Nielsen again wasn't available to the Rangers for most of the season, so Anders Hedberg was pretty well a non-factor in most of these contests. Now, John Davidson made 25 saves and 28 shots, and Wayne Stevenson, just like in '76, was easy to figure out. He gave up 6 goals on 21 shots. Now, the Flyers of '78-'79. Let's go over just a little bit on their campaign, because it basically doesn't tell the whole story. The 1979 Flyers weren't the Flyers of 1980 that went all those consecutive games, without giving out a loss. I think what happened, ladies and gentlemen, just me, the trip to play with the Vancouver in that best of 3, they had to go all the way to the West Coast. But the Flyers that year were not the Flyers again of the mid-1970s, even though they had a 40-25-5 record, but only 14 victories on the road, ladies and gentlemen. Now 14-15-11. Their defense was good, but Bobby Clarke and the rest of the crew. Bobby Clarke was a non-factor in the playoffs. Now, this team was a mixture of veterans and returnees. Billy Barber at 34 counters, Clarke at 16, Bregman 24, Rick McClish at 26, Reggie at 34. Blake Dunlop, in an overachieving season, had 20, and Paul Holmgren, but they weren't as strong as they could have been on the back defense. Most of their defense, besides Jimmy Watson, wasn't scoring many points in Bob Daly. So, I mean, they weren't really the offensive team they were in the 1970s. Now, the big factor, of course, Bernie Perron was not available. His career was pretty well done that year because of an eye injury. That was a big factor, just like 76. So, ladies and gentlemen, the Ranger-Flyer series, I don't think that the Rangers knew how strong they were until they bet them. And they went on to beat the Islanders in the next round. But of all factors played together, a lot of people were predicting Philadelphia Flyers in the Stanley Cup that year. But they were underrating the Rangers. I think with the revival of Bobby Sheehan, Carol Vadney was playing good. Espo had his last gasp of glory. You got to understand this, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget, Esposito got in the finals in 70 and 72 and 74. He knew how to get the ball away. And what really was a factor for him, when he played in the World Championships, when the Russians were telling him what to wear, like on his head and stuff like that, he was really pissed off. And I think Esposito, that's his last gasp of glory, and it cemented his legacy in a lot of ways. And Ron Duguay was young, and Murdoch not having as much problem with drugs and stuff like that. But, the Rangers of 1979, ladies and gentlemen, are a really, really good balanced team. They're exciting to watch. And even though their defense could have been better, but the Flyers, again, were right for the picking. But Robbie Moore, I mean, no Bernie Perron, what are you going to do? You couldn't put in St. Croix. They never traded. They didn't trade for anybody because you thought Perron was coming back. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's the story of one of the best playoff series in the 1970s. Nobody talks about it anymore. If you like what we're doing here with our New York Rangers and Philadelphia Flyers vintage podcast, let us know with a like, comment, subscribe, or share. Bye.